Welcome to the School of Consciousness. Today, what we're going to do is I'm going to ask you guys what you want help with, and then we're going to do a live teaching class or a live coaching call, essentially. So, with the School of Consciousness, usually I'm providing you guys with different topics to talk about. We're talking about healing the nervous system or healing anxiety or healing emotional trauma. We're talking about accessing higher states of consciousness and mastering our focus, our attention, our concentration. These are some of the classes that we've done over the last few weeks. However, today I wanted to mix it up and I wanted to really embody the classroom mentality, and I wanted to ask you guys what you want to learn. So one thing that I want to share before we start this, because I know when it comes to asking questions and when it comes to, putting yourself out there like that, asking the question, sometimes there's nerves, sometimes there's a feeling of, I'm not sure if I want to ask that question, or maybe I feel a bit embarrassed to ask that question, or will I look silly or stupid or dumb if I ask a question? And I really want to encourage you guys to adopt this mentality, the mentality of going first. Right. So I learnt this mentality in a book. I read a book, and it was a story. A woman was telling this story about how she always tries to go first. Because if you don't go first, you're always waiting for someone else to go first. And that could be if you're just walking down the street and you want to smile at someone, or if you want to say hello to someone. If you always wait for someone else to go first, you that's outside of your control. You don't know if they're actually going to go first. So what you can control is you can control going first yourself. So I want to encourage you to always adopt this mindset of just going first. If you have a question, go first. If you want to say hello to someone, go first. If you want to smile at someone, go first. If you want to start to hug your family members, maybe you guys aren't hugging your family members or expressing love to your family members. Maybe that's not a thing that you do. Go first. Start that thing, right? If you want to bring in some new habits or behaviors within your relationship or within your work that aren't already there, go first. Don't wait for someone else to do it. You do it, right? And so this is the mentality that I want to share with you with this questioning framework in this live classroom as well today, because it's always important to go first. So I have got a couple of questions already in the chat box, and I'm going to start with them, right? So the first question is from Mia, and Mia says, "I would like to learn how to self-validate myself, anxiety, and heal from it." Cool. So self-validation. How do we work on anxiety and heal from it? So let's start with the self-validation first, because I think the point that I just shared will help with that, right? Going first. So the whole idea about going first is just putting yourself out there, right? It's when you go first, it's like whether that's asking a question or saying hello to someone, there's an underlying feeling that you are allowed to do that, right? You are valid in doing that. You don't need to wait for someone else. You don't need to hang around and just, you know, let others run the show. When you go first, you are essentially validating yourself and saying that I am valid. My question is valid. My opinion is valid. My thoughts are valid. My perspective is valid. So that's a huge one, just straight off the cuff, right? It's just back onto this idea of going first. To validate yourself is essentially to accept yourself. Right? One of the big problems a lot of people have is always seeking external validation. I always need to get validation from someone else to make myself feel okay. So that what happens, that's a slippery slope to go down, because then you're always looking for someone else to make you feel okay. The funny thing is you can never actually achieve that. You will never feel valid if your validation is coming from external. And so the way that you can validate yourself, you can have this self-validation, is through accepting yourself, accepting who you are, warts and all, right? So not just accepting the good parts of you, but accepting the bad parts of you as well. It's like you accept yourself, warts and all. You know? You accept your past, you accept your present, and there's a total acceptance of who you are as an individual. There's a quote that I love which says, allow yourself to be yourself and allow others to do the same. Allow yourself to be yourself and allow others to do the same. It's a simple little quote, but it's so powerful. When you allow yourself to be yourself, it means that you're accepting of yourself. You're not trying to hide yourself. Now, self-acceptance is huge, right? And so it's really about self-love, compassion for yourself. And sometimes the best path to you know, self-acceptance is through forgiveness as well. So if you're not feeling valid, sometimes you feel like, well, my perspective isn't valid, my opinion isn't valid, my thoughts aren't valid. Usually that's coming from some kind of a guilt complex where you feel like maybe you've done something wrong or you feel guilty for the way that you've been living, or it could be also like a shame or embarrassment um, of yourself, right? Usually those are the two things that hold you back with self-validation. It's like I either feel guilty for things I've done in the past, I regret things I've done in the past, or I feel embarrassed or humiliated about things I've done in the past, which means that I'm not accepting myself in the present. I'm not validating, I don't think I'm valid here and now because of what I've done in the past or because of the life I've lived, previously. And so how do you validate yourself from there? You have to forgive yourself, right? No one's perfect. I've done a lot of bad things early in my life. When I was younger, when I was a teenager, I was really rebellious. I was drinking a lot. I was smoking a lot of weed. I was always out and about causing a ruckus at nighttime with, groups of friends that were, just doing stuff that they, shouldn't have been doing. Like you even hear now about all these young teens, like hooligans, like getting up to mischief and stuff like that. Now, we never like stole any cars or anything like that, like you see on the news these days. But we would do stuff like, go and tip people's bins over if it was bin night. I remember doing that one time. We would harass the staff at McDonald's and stuff like that because we'd always be at McDonald's and just be harassing people. We'd just be out and about drinking in public and just causing a bit of a ruckus and a scene. Um, yeah, just always just doing stuff that wasn't really great. One night, I remember I was particularly angry, and this is something that I'm not ashamed of, not proud of, sorry. I don't think I've ever shared this, but one night I actually like shared this publicly. One night I actually picked up a huge rock and threw it in front of a moving bus. I threw a massive rock in front of a moving bus just because I was drunk and thought it was funny. That was when I was like 15 years old. So the bus driver ended up pulling up the bus and he got out of the bus and he came over and I thought he was going to deck me. Like I thought he was going to smash me. But I was just saying like, I'm 15, you can't touch me because I'm underage and all this kind of stuff. And so, I was a kid. I didn't really know what I was doing. I was obviously not handling my emotions well. My parents had divorced. None of that is really an excuse, but I was seeking attention and validation. And the way that I was doing it back then was by being a rebel, being rebellious. And so, like I said, I'm not proud of any of that. But when I started to meditate when I was 17, I started to realize, man, I'm way out of line. I need to get myself back into check. Then a big part of it was having to learn how to forgive myself for doing all of that. Forgive myself for all of the bad things that I had done. Forgive myself for harassing the staff at McDonald's. Forgive myself for throwing a rock at a bus, right? I had to forgive myself. I also did some nasty things to members of my family. Like my mum and I used to fight all the time, and that was pretty horrible. And I had to forgive myself for things that I had done then. So forgiveness, self-forgiveness is a beautiful way to come into self-acceptance. So accepting yourself as you are. And when you come into this acceptance of who you are, that's when you'll feel valid as a person, right? Um, so yeah, that's a little story and also just a little bit of an idea of what you need to do to validate yourself. You need to forgive yourself for anything that you're holding any remorse to. You need to learn how to accept yourself. And you can do this in your meditation practice, right? So I always encourage you, if you're in the school of consciousness, to be doing meditation at least 10 minutes a day, right? 10 minutes a day in the morning. That's what I started with. And when I was younger, I would meditate on forgiveness and acceptance. And a lot of this stuff would just come up to the surface. And when I did meditate on those things, there would be a healing process that would take place. So that's that. Um, so this stuff, it's like you can show up to the School of Consciousness, you can do this work, you can listen to me talk. But what I would really encourage you to do is practice meditation on a day-to-day basis. And, that's going to help you with the healing process of everything that we're talking about now. It'll help you with becoming more accepting of yourself. It'll help you with forgiving yourself. And forgiving yourself, is the fastest path to forgiving others. Because often it's not about forgiving others. It's about when you learn how to forgive yourself, then forgiving others comes naturally. So it's not really about trying to forgive anyone else. But first forgive yourself for whatever you feel like you may have done or may not have done. And when you can learn how to forgive yourself, forgiving others becomes easy. When you learn how to forgive yourself, accepting yourself becomes easy, and accepting others becomes easy as well. And that's when you can start to also be a lot more trusting. So if we're talking about now coming into healing anxiety, anxiety is essentially it's fear. There's a fear-driven response, and usually that comes from a lack of trust. I don't trust myself, or I don't trust the world, or I don't trust people. I don't feel safe in my body. I don't feel safe in the world. All of this is stemming from like a lack of trust, a lack of the perception of safety. And so that's what essentially will create anxiety. So if you're not accepting yourself, if you're not trusting yourself, if you're not accepting others, if you're not trusting others, that's a scary way to live. Like it's essentially saying that you need to be afraid of the world, you need to be afraid of yourself. And that's why anxiety can be so high, because you're not accepting yourself, you're not trusting yourself, you're not trusting others, you're not accepting others, right? So you're stuck in this fear cycle. Now, of course, it's more complex than that with anxiety, right? It comes down to a lot of other things as well, like how well you can manage your stress, how healthy your nervous system is. So there's a lot of just basic things you need to do as well, like exercise, eat well, do meditation, do things that are going to be just overall good for your physical health first. You improve your physical health, your mental health will start to improve. Um, but at an emotional level, it comes down to trust, right? Learning how to trust yourself, learning how to accept yourself. And so it's a great question, Mia. So thank you for asking it. And I'm going to move on to Rachel's question now, because it's also along a similar vein, right, of emotions, awareness, and acceptance. So a lot of what I was just talking about, right? Acceptance is like if you're on the spiritual development journey, you're on the spiritual growth journey. Acceptance is really like the name of the game. To be totally in a state of acceptance for everything that is. All of your suffering happens when you are in resistance to what is. To what is, like the totality of like what is here in the present moment. Or what is in the past. Or what could be in the future. All suffering happens when you are in resistance to what is, or what could be, or what was. So acceptance is really just about accepting what is, accepting it as it is without trying to change it, accepting what was, accepting it as it was without trying to change it, and then also accepting what could be, right? Because you don't really know what's going to happen in the future. So just accepting, okay, maybe that's going to happen, maybe this is going to happen. Anxiety happens when you're like in resistance to all of that. You're like, oh, I fear about the future or regret about the past. And so is essentially that's like you're resisting the future and you're resisting the past. And then sometimes we have these experiences in the present moment, and we can either be accepting of it, okay, cool, it is what it is, or I don't want this to be happening. And as soon as there's that I don't want it to happen, it's resistance. There's a desire. and the desire can create the disappointment. If you don't have what you want, then you get disappointed, and that creates the suffering. So it's about just accepting what is. Now, don't get me wrong, I think it's great to have like um, a goal, some kind of a goal to work towards, but you want to have that goal and with as little desire or attachment to it as possible. So it becomes almost like it needs to go beyond a belief of like, I believe that I'm going to get that. And it actually needs to go beyond that to like a knowing. It needs to be a knowing because a belief implies that there's some kind of doubt. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not true. I believe this, but another person doesn't believe this, right? So with belief, there's a bit of doubt there. There's a bit of like, you have to, it has to be not like potentially not real for you to believe in it, right? Like there's it's like you don't believe if you have white skin, you don't believe that you have white skin. You know that you have white skin. If you have black skin, you don't believe that you have black skin. You know that you have black skin, right? If it's daytime, you don't believe that it's daytime. You know it is daytime. If it's nighttime, you don't believe it's nighttime. You know it's nighttime. So with your goals, if you want to, become the best version of yourself, for example, let's just use that as an example because there's lots of goals that you could have, but if you're working on your mental health and your spirituality, your spiritual growth, then the highest goal is just to be the best version of yourself, to be the highest version of you. So we'll just use that as a goal. And so what we want to do is we don't want to believe that you can be the highest version of yourself. You want to know that I can be the highest version of myself. So you got the goal there. I know I'm going to be the best version of me. And then you become unattached to the process. So there's not like a lot of attachment to it. Yeah, there's not too much desire around it. It's not too much wanting of it. It's just a knowing and then a becoming of it, right? That's going to be the best way for you to move towards your goals. But like I said, you want to be unattached. And to be unattached is to be accepting of what is and to be accepting of the path towards wherever it is that you want to go. So with acceptance, it's just about, it's almost like a letting go or like a surrender into trust. It will happen. I know it will happen, right? Whatever it is that I feel like I want so badly, I know it's going to happen. I'm in total acceptance of the path towards wherever I'm going. Right? Um, so just drop a 111 in the chat, or if you're watching the replay of this, like comment below if this is all landing for you, how it lands for you, if you have any questions. But that's how I see it, right? You want to just be aware of this fact that all of suffering happens when you are in the resistance to what is. So the enlightened state is essentially a state of just isness. It just is. Everything is, and that's it. There's nothing else that needs to be said. It's ineffable. It's indescribable. It just is. And that's the end of the story. And when you are in alignment with that isness, there's no suffering. You're just in a total acceptance of the present what is. How do I surrender if I don't trust? Well, that's a practice. Meditate every day on trust and surrender. So people don't trust because they believe that you believe that you can't trust. Maybe you don't trust. Why don't you trust? Maybe something bad's happened to you in the past, right? Not trusting people. You lost your trust somehow. When you were a kid, when you were a child, you trusted, right? When you were a baby, you trusted. It wasn't even a question. It wasn't even a question of do I trust or do I not trust. When you were a child, right? You were innocent and you just did trust. Like you trusted your parents, you trusted the world, you would run around and you would just be in this trusting state. It wasn't even something that's a question, so you're asking the question now, but in a childlike state, in that state of pure innocence, that's not a question. So what happens is over the years, you've developed this idea that you can't trust. or that you don't trust. And, fair enough, maybe something happened, that created that sense of I can't trust or I don't trust. Um, that created some fear, some conditioning from society. Maybe some things that happened at school, things that happened with your parents, like all these sorts of things may have happened. You started to develop cognitive function as you went through your childhood, your teenage years. You started to think, you started to develop that brain function, and you started to think about things. You started to be influenced by the world around you, and we developed this idea that I can't trust, right? So in a lot of spiritual teachings, they always talk about rebirth, right? Like Jesus had the rebirth, right? To be born again. What that means is this is what I think it believes. I think it means, sorry, or what I know it means actually, because I've experienced this myself. You go through life, you have your innocence as a child, and then you grow up and you start to develop your cognitive function, and you start to get influenced by the world, and you're trying to make sense of everything, and you're trying to understand what's going on. And then, you go through your teenage years and stuff like that. And this born again thing happens wake up, when you wake up again, right? So you kind of like wake up to the higher truth. That's what it is to be born again. You have this like second birth, which is almost like a second you were born into this world innocent and pure. I really know that. That's true. I've just had a kid myself. You can see it. And then you develop like all of this stuff that takes you away from that innocence and takes you away from that purity. And the being born again is about returning to that state of innocence and purity, returning to that innocent, childlike state where everything is trustworthy and you can trust the world, and it's okay to trust the world. That is a spiritual journey that you must go on. And not everyone does go on that journey, right? But if you're here and you're listening to this, know that that is a possibility for you to be born again, to have like an awakening, people would call it, right? Uh, I really know that is when you will learn to trust again. That's why I'm so big on meditation as well, because what that is essentially this born again, this awakening. It's like a realization that you have that everything is perfect as it is. I've been talking about this a little bit in my coaching recently, in the coaching community. And we talked about on Monday this great balance that exists in life, in the universe, in the world. There's a great balance, right, between the positive and the negative. So trusting or not trusting, both of them are fine, right? Both of them are allowed and both of them are actually necessary. So you don't necessarily need to trust, right? Not trusting is fine. It's a part of the grand scheme of things. It's a part of the perfection that is life itself. Everything hangs in this beautiful divine balance where not trusting and trusting are just two ends of the spectrum, and both of them are necessary, right? So it's like when you have this awakening, you realize, oh, okay, if I'm in fear, that there needs to be fear for there to be trust. There needs to be hate for there to be love. There needs to be night so that there can be day. So coming back to acceptance, you're not trying to get away from your suffering, essentially. You wake up to the fact that it's actually necessary. I need to suffer so that I can find peace. So it's a crazy kind of paradox, because you realize that everything is perfect as it is. All the suffering was perfect. Everything in my past was perfect. It needed to happen. It needed to happen because it did happen. And you come into this beautiful state of pure acceptance for everything that is and everything that was and everything that could be in the future. So you don't feel like you really need to change anything, because you wake up to this realization that it's all perfect anyway. So how do I surrender if I don't trust? Yeah. See if you can feel into that, what I've just spoken about. See if you can meditate on that. Surrendering is just about letting go. Now, humans have this tendency to need to be in control of everything. This is our conscious function, right? I can control things. So I'm going to control everything. And letting go is the total opposite of that. Don't try to control anything. That's a practice, right? But it also can be done in a minute, right? Like I give this example of just like, here's a pen I'm holding on. Now I drop the pen, I let go, I surrender the pen. It's as easy as that. Just loosen the grip, right? Learn to trust. Like make it your intention to trust. Make it your intention to be trusting. And maybe that feels uncomfortable for you. Sweet. Allow yourself to be uncomfortable. Accept yourself in the uncomfortableness. Trust the uncomfortableness of trusting. So yeah, you can really go zoom out and see that bigger picture. It's all allowed to be there. All the suffering is allowed to be there. Even the insecurity, the lack of self-validation, the anxiety, it's all allowed to be there. The resistance to it is what creates more suffering. The acceptance of it will dissolve the suffering. And that applies to everything. So that's it for today. That's about we've covered the half an hour mark. Let me know if there's any final questions or anything like that, or if you did enjoy this, just yeah, drop it in the chat box. Any final considerations? And if you're watching the replay, yeah, I'd love to see your comments in the YouTube video. Comment if you have any questions or anything like that, and I'll do my best to respond. Also, if you would like to see any specific topics covered in the coming weeks or months of the School of Consciousness, then drop it in the comments, let me know. Drop it in the chat box, let me know, and I'll do my best to cover those points. Awesome. I love that this can be a co-collaborative or a co-creative space. I'm really big on that, right? I think it's awesome. I think we can all learn better when we are more involved as a group, as a collective, as a togetherness. So I really encourage co-creation, co-collaboration. So make those comments, tell me what you guys want, share it in the chat box, even send me a message, right? Send me a message on Instagram. If there's something that you want to learn about, you can always ask. And I take that stuff seriously. So if I do get questions, if I do get suggestions, I will take it seriously and I will implement those things into the teachings. So that's enough for today, guys. Thank you very much for being here, and I will see you next week.